building off of some previous modules that we've talked through, some of the admin expenses versus general operating versus programmatic expenses, this submodule has been all about indirect costs and thinking about how do you calculate that and break that down. So in this breakout, we're going to be talking a little bit about what constitutes some of those indirect costs. How do you determine a rate? How do you determine that breakdown? And just putting an accurate picture together, showing the funder that you've done your homework and you can talk through what those rates entail. So I'm thinking about things like, like your CFO or your accountant. I'm thinking about, more of the administrative employee offices. But
Mhm.
how have you seen that indirect cost broken down with organizations you've worked for?
For sure. I've seen it definitely in terms of internet usage, as well as office space. And given the fact of the pandemic, that actually definitely has worked to the benefit of some nonprofits to be able to cut costs in certain areas, or not if you don't want to cut costs and you want to keep that budget at its same number, depending on your strategic plan, you are able to reallocate that funding in another area, which then allows for that rate calculation component frequency, really understanding where and when you need something, and also is it an ongoing cost or is it a static cost?
Absolutely. And I think just devil's in the details. So even thinking about your square footage, like what parts of your facilities are direct client engagement versus where it's more of that internal meeting space. And again, we talked about this in a previous module, but kind of getting some of those percentages calculated so that you can show the funder your math and break down why you think your indirect cost rate is X because you've looked and done an inventory in all your assets, all the facilities, all your personnel, and you can assign different percentages for each person. So if someone is running your community soup kitchen, that's 100% programmatic cost. Where as your executive director, if he or she, they're going to be overseeing all programs, of course, but a big part of their responsibility day to day is that fundraising component. So
Mhm.
try to breaking down what their hourly breakdown is on a weekly basis and coming up with a percentage based off of that.
Absolutely. And also it also steers you in the direction of understanding what program design did you actually formulate to where the indirect costs make sense. And so sometimes when you look at your budget and it's either inflated or you feel like you're lacking in certain areas, I've definitely seen nonprofits be able to leverage the opportunity to run a program shorter than they typically would, but while communicating that to a funder in terms of, yes, we stopped providing service in this way because we thought it would be best to allocate the dollars or the time in this way. And it better helps your rate calculations because, again, it strengthens the intentionality of the nonprofit. Because when funders are looking to provide funding to your nonprofit, they're not only looking to maximize impact, they're also looking to provide it to responsible folks that know how to, again, best distribute the funding dollars to ensure
Yeah.
maximum impact.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I would add about indirect cost rate is that, more so for larger institutions like a university like Rutgers, they'll have a negotiated indirect cost rate that they can add on applications, typically government applications like
Mhm.
federal or state governments. However, for nonprofits, there is a term called the de minimis rate, where if you don't have that negotiated rate, you can just put that percentage in. Typically, there are some calculations in terms of what cost categories you can use that on. Typically, personnel, direct supplies, up to 25 or 50,000 of each contract that you're building into your budget. And the rate you can use differs by the funder, whether it's state or even different federal agencies. Typically, somewhere within that 10 to 20%. But that's where you'd want to take a look at the RFA.
Yes.
Highly recommend that if you have the opportunity to build in an indirect cost rate, a de minimis rate, you take it because, as we all know, it's not just the direct programming that you're putting in, but
Right.
all the support, all like talking to your accountant about classifying these costs, getting the oversight, getting the direction from your executive director. These are all these external costs that maybe aren't calculated, but helps offset some of those hours so that the nonprofit can still keep going and not have to cut costs in programmatic areas.
Absolutely. And the science is important of it being able to really truly use those numbers to where it's becoming accurate for the funder to really understand and digest exactly where you're getting your numbers from and making sure that they're accurate and not skewed. And so as you continue to reflect in this section, as we heavily talk about understanding indirect costs as well as that rate calculation so that you're providing a sample to the funder that makes sense for the community that you're serving, truly reflect on which expenses do you typically categorize as indirect, and make sure that they're in the right category as well, as Anthony has broken down to the various different types, and also explain why, right? It's that justification piece that really can make all the difference as it relates to landing that funding that you're looking for. And so we look forward to talking more with you about budgets, as well as making sure you're comfortably and strategically making sure that it's implemented within your grant application so that you're securing the win.